All right, everyone, get ready because today we are going deep into Canadian government digital services.
Websites.
Apps, the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah,
It's all about how we actually access all those essential services these days, right? And how it's all changing.
exactly. It's becoming more and more important. And we're going to be looking at a report by the Parliamentary Budget Officer.
PBO.
Yeah, the PBO, they put this together when a senator asked them to. He's really keen on making sure all Canadians can easily use these digital services.
Right. It's called Overview of the Government's Digital Service Transformation.
That's it.
And it really takes a close look at what the government is doing, what's working, what's not.
Even compares it to some other countries, which is really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So what's the mission today? Well, we want to know, where does Canada actually stand right now? Are we doing well? Are we falling behind?
Right. Are we ahead of the curve?
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see what's going well and what's not going so well.
Hopefully some good stories to tell.
Yeah, and then the big question, what challenges and opportunities are out there for the future?
That's what we really want to know. And just think about it. A few years ago, just before the pandemic,
Oh, yeah.
imagine trying to deal with government services then.
It was a different world, right?
Totally. And then suddenly, boom, everything's online.
Yeah, everything.
Applying for benefits, taxes, healthcare information.
All of it.
It really showed how much we need strong digital services.
It's like the pandemic launched us into this digital future, whether we were ready or not.
Absolutely. Like a fast forward button got pressed.
And to their credit, the government has been trying to modernize things for a while.
Yeah, they've been working on it.
But the pandemic really kicked it into high gear, and that's where Shared Services Canada comes in.
They're like the unsung heroes working behind the scenes.
Right, doing all that important stuff.
Yeah, they handle the digital infrastructure for basically all the government departments.
Yeah, it's like they're the IT department for the entire government.
Exactly. Keeping those websites up and running.
Keeping everything going.
Making sure we can all get to the websites.
And to really push things forward, they even created some brand new leadership roles specifically for digital transformation.
Yeah, like they said, okay, this is serious. We need people in charge of this.
Dedicated people to run the show, right?
Yeah, and it shows they're not just thinking about the techie stuff, but also the bigger picture.
Like the strategy and how people experience it.
Exactly, how the whole government works, even.
And then there's these digital identity pilot programs they've been running.
Oh, yeah, imagine just having one ID for all the government services.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, be so much easier.
We'll talk more about that later because it has some really interesting implications for the future.
Big implications. And all of this is part of what they call Canada's digital ambition.
Like their master plan for this whole digital journey.
Yeah, exactly. And there are 4 key themes that guide how they're doing everything.
I'm all ears. What are they?
Okay, so first, they want to be really good at the tech side of things and how they operate.
That makes sense, right? You need the right tools for the job.
Exactly. You got to have the right tools. Second, they want to use data to make services and programs better.
Like personalized and more efficient.
Exactly. Anticipating what people need. Data is so important these days.
Data's king. What's next?
The third theme is about being proactive.
Okay, I like that. So not just reacting to problems, but getting ahead of them.
Exactly. That's what they mean by having an action-ready digital strategy and policy.
That's good, being ready for whatever comes next. And what's the fourth theme?
This one's really interesting. They're looking at changing how they fund things, find the right people, and even the culture of how the government works.
So it's not just about the technology, it's about the people, too.
Absolutely. Attracting talented people, creating a culture where people can try new things, and making sure all this stuff has the money to continue.
It's like they're saying, hey, we need to change how we think and work.
Exactly. It's about being flexible and able to change as the digital world changes. So that's the big picture.
All right, but let's get down to specifics. What does this actually look like in practice?
Okay, so let's take 2 services most people have probably used.
Okay.
The CRA's My Account.
Our favorite way to do taxes online.
Ever love that.
Yeah, I guess. And then there's Employment and Social Development, Canada's My Service Canada account.
Or MSCA for short.
Right, MSCA. And both of these platforms are supposed to make life easier for Canadians.
Right, you can get information, apply for things, and manage everything online.
Exactly. But this is where it gets interesting. The report looks at the costs and savings of these services.
Okay.
And that's where we see some differences in how open they are.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like the CRA, they were a little hesitant to share all their numbers.
Really?
Yeah, saying some of it was confidential.
Huh. That's a bit strange. I mean, It's public money we're talking about.
Right, exactly. You'd think they'd be more open.
Transparency is so important for accountability.
Now, ESDC, on the other hand, was pretty upfront about their costs.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, they told us that improving the MSCA platform cost $9.1 million, and they spend another $3.3 million every year to keep it running.
Okay, so that's a significant amount.
It is, but they're providing a lot of services to a lot of people.
True, and it's important to look at the big picture.
And here's something really interesting. ESDC said their main goal wasn't even saving money when they built the MSCA.
Oh, so what was their focus?
They wanted to make the service better and easier to use.
So focusing on the user experience.
Exactly. And maybe that leads to savings in the long run.
Right, if it's easier to use, people might need less help.
Maybe. Okay, so we have these two separate services.
Yeah, my account for taxes, MSCA for employment, and social stuff.
But what about connecting them? That's where this tell us once principle comes in.
Ah, tell us once, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's a great example of how sharing data can make things simpler.
Give me an example.
Sure, if you're already registered for my account with the CRA, you can use that same login for ESDC's MSCA.
Ah, so you don't need to create a whole new account.
Exactly. They're trying to make things a bit easier for us.
I like that. It saves so much time and hassle.
And it's not just those two departments. They're also working with banks.
Really?
Yeah, they're called sign-in partners.
Sign-in partners, what's that?
So you can use your online banking login for some government services.
Oh, wow, that's super convenient.
Right, and they're even doing this with provinces now. British Columbia and Alberta are already in,
Okay,
and Quebec is going to be joining soon.
that's interesting.
This is where that digital ID idea we talked about earlier really starts to come together.
Oh, yeah, that single digital ID for everything.
Imagine having one ID that works for federal and provincial governments.
That would have been amazing. It would really change how we interact with the government online.
It would, but it also raises some questions about privacy and data security.
Yeah, big questions.
Definitely things we need to think about carefully as this moves forward.
Important considerations.
But speaking of digital IDs and doing things differently, let's see what's happening in another part of the world. Ukraine.
Ukraine, okay.
They've been doing some really cool things with their DIA system.
I've heard about DIA. It's been really successful, right?
It has. They've simplified so many public services, and it shows how powerful digital technology can be.
Tell me more about it. What is it exactly?
Well, DIA actually means action in English, and it lives up to its name.
Action. I like that.
It's like a one-stop shop for anything you need to do with the government in Ukraine.
Really? Like what?
Everything. You can access documents, pay taxes, apply for things, even register your car.
Wow, they've gone all in on this digital approach.
They have, and it's really impressive.
So what makes it different from what we're doing here in Canada?
One big difference is that Ukraine has made digital documents legally the same as the paper versions.
Really? So your digital driver's license is just as good as the plastic card?
Exactly, and it's the same for passports, business registrations, everything.
That's a bold move. It shows they're serious about this digital society idea.
They are, and it seems to be working.
How so?
Well, DIA has been incredibly popular. Millions of Ukrainians use it all the time.
It's fantastic. It must have made things so much easier for people.
It has, and it's a great example of what happens when you create user-friendly digital services that actually work for people.
Absolutely. It's like they've figured out the secret formula.
Yeah, in a lot of ways they have. Other countries are even looking to them as an example.
So what can we learn from them here in Canada?
Well, one big takeaway is that you need the government to be fully on board and committed.
Right, that makes sense.
The leaders in Ukraine made digital transformation a top priority. They put money into it and created an environment where it could succeed.
So it's not just about saying it's important, you got to actually back it up with action.
Exactly. They didn't just talk the talk, they walk the walk.
That's inspiring. It shows that real change is possible.
It does, but it's not just about willpower, right?
No, you also need to have the right infrastructure and people with the right skills.
Like having the tools and knowing how to use them.
Exactly. Ukraine invested a lot in building their digital infrastructure and training people.
Makes sense. You can't just slap a website on top of old processes and expect magic to happen.
Right, you need to upgrade everything.
Another key lesson is focusing on the user.
So making sure the services are easy to use.
Exactly. Ukraine makes sure their services were intuitive and accessible to everyone, no matter their tech skills.
So it's not just about building fancy tech, it's about making sure it actually works for people.
Absolutely. If it's too hard to use, people won't use it.
Makes sense. They also did a great job communicating with people throughout the process.
Yeah, they kept everyone informed and got feedback along the way.
So it's about bringing people along on the journey, not just forcing change on them.
Exactly, and that builds trust.
Makes people feel like they're part of it.
Okay, but let's be real. Every country has its own unique challenges. What are some things that might make it hard for Canada to do what Ukraine did?
Well, for one, our government structure is pretty complex.
Right, federal, provincial, municipal, all those different levels.
Exactly. And trying to get them all on the same page can be tricky.
It's like herding cats.
Another big challenge is privacy and data security.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Canadians care about how their information is used, and rightly so.
We want convenience, but not at the cost of our privacy.
Absolutely. It's a balancing act.
Okay, so we've got some things to figure out there.
We do.
But let's go back to the PBO report for a second.
Okay.
They had some concerns about transparency, outdated laws, and how we track the money being spent.
Right. Those are important issues.
What do they recommend we do about those things?
Well, on transparency, they want the government to be clearer about how they're spending money on this digital transformation stuff.
Yeah, like show us the receipts.
Exactly. And they want more details about what projects are getting funded and what's actually being accomplished.
So not just how much, but what for, and what are we getting out of it?
And they want to make sure those funds are being used well.
Accountability is key.
Absolutely.
What about those outdated laws?
The report says we need to take a good look at all those old laws and regulations that might be making it harder to deliver digital services.
Some of those laws are probably from the dinosaur age.
And they just don't work in the digital world.
We need to update the rule book for the digital age.
Exactly. And we need to make sure those laws support innovation instead of holding it back.
All right, so transparency, accountability, and modernizing those old laws.
Those are important steps.
But what about that gap in financial reporting we talked about? How do we fix that?
Well, the report says we need to get better at tracking both the costs and the savings of these digital services.
So not just how much we're spending, but how much we're saving too.
Exactly. And we need to measure things like time saved, increased efficiency, and how happy people are with the services.
It's about the big picture, not just the dollars and cents.
Absolutely. And we need to be open about all of this.
Transparent.
Yes, make the information public so people can see how their tax dollars are being used.
And hold the government accountable.
Exactly. It's about giving people the information they need to participate in the process.
So this is about more than just websites and apps.
It's about shaping how we interact with our government.
And how we access essential services.
It's a big deal, and it's going to affect everyone.
It is, and as we go deeper into this topic, we'll explore all these ideas and challenges even more.
We will, and we'll look at what role citizens can play in making things better.
Because ultimately, this is about building a digital future that works for everyone.
A future that reflects our values and aspirations.
That's a great goal, and one that's worth striving for.
Definitely.
It's amazing to see how other countries are handling this whole digital transformation thing. You know, we've been talking about Canada's approach, but I'm really curious about Ukraine and their DMEA system. They've really jumped in head first.
Yeah, they haven't been afraid to try some new things, and it seems to be working out for them.
One thing that really stands out is how they've made digital documents legally equal to the paper versions.
That's right. It's like they've completely embraced the idea that digital is just as valid as physical.
Imagine a world where your driver's license or passport is just as official on your phone as it is in your wallet.
It's a big shift in thinking, and it has a lot of implications for how we interact with the government.
Absolutely, and I think it's something we can learn from here in Canada as we explore our own digital ID program.
Definitely. It shows that you need to have a strong legal framework in place to support these kinds of initiatives.
It's like building a house. You need a solid foundation if you want it to stand up.
Exactly. And the legal framework is the foundation for a truly digital society.
So how has this legal recognition of digital documents actually impacted people's lives in Ukraine?
Well, it's made it incredibly easy to access government services. You can do almost anything online now.
Wow, that's incredible. What kind of things can you do?
Everything from paying taxes to registering a business, all from your phone or computer.
No more waiting in line at government offices.
Not for those things. It's all been streamlined and digitized.
That sounds like a dream come true. It's like having a personal assistant for all your government needs.
In a way, it is. And it's not just about convenience either.
Oh, what else is it about?
It's also about reducing bureaucracy and corruption. By moving things online, you're eliminating a lot of the opportunities for human error and manipulation.
That's a huge benefit, especially in countries that have struggled with those issues in the past.
Right. It's about creating a more transparent and accountable system.
So Ukraine has really turned a challenge into an opportunity.
They have, and it's been incredibly successful. People are really embracing this new way of interacting with the government.
It's amazing to see how technology can be used to empower people and make their lives better.
Absolutely, and I think it's a great example for other countries to follow.
So what are some of the key lessons we can learn from Ukraine's experience here in Canada?
Well, one of the most important things is political will and commitment. The leaders in Ukraine made digital transformation a top priority, and they backed it up with resources and action.
They really put their money where their mouth is.
Exactly, and that kind of leadership is essential if you want to see real change happen.
It's not enough to just talk about it. You have to be willing to make it happen.
And you also need to invest in the right infrastructure and expertise. Ukraine did just create a few websites. They built a whole digital ecosystem.
Right, it's like laying down new train tracks. You can't just put a high-speed train on old tracks and expect it to work.
Exactly. You need to upgrade the whole system.
Another important lesson is focusing on the user. Ukraine made sure their services were easy to use and accessible to everyone.
That's right. It's about designing services that meet people's needs, not just creating technology for technology's sake.
Technology should be a tool to empower people, not a barrier.
And it's also important to keep people informed and engaged throughout the process. Ukraine did a great job of communicating with citizens and getting their feedback.
That's crucial. People are more likely to embrace change if they feel like they're part of the process.
Exactly. It's about building trust and ownership.
But let's be realistic, there are always challenges.
Of course.
What are some of the things that might make it difficult for Canada to replicate Ukraine's success?
Well, one challenge is the complexity of our government structure. We have multiple levels of government, each with its own systems and processes.
It's like trying to herd cats. Getting everyone on the same page can be tough.
And then there's the issue of privacy and data security. Canadians are very concerned about how their personal information is used, and we need to make sure those concerns are addressed.
Absolutely. We want digital services that are convenient and efficient, but not at the expense of our privacy.
It's a balancing act, and we need to find the right balance.
So we have some big questions to grapple with as we move forward.
We do, but I'm confident that we can learn from the experiences of other countries and find solutions that work for Canada.
I like that positive outlook. Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and go back to the PBO report.
Sure.
We talked about their concerns about transparency, outdated legislation, and financial reporting, but what exactly do they recommend we do about those things?
Well, on transparency, they want more clarity and detail in how the government reports its spending on digital transformation.
Like, show us the receipts.
Exactly. They want to see where the money is going, what projects are being funded, and what outcomes are being achieved.
Not just how much, but what for, and are we getting our money's worth?
Right. And they also want to see more accountability. They want to know that the money is being used effectively and efficiently.
So transparency is about knowing where the money is going, and accountability is about making sure it's being used wisely.
Exactly. And on the issue of outdated legislation, the report recommends a comprehensive review and modernization of any laws that are hindering digital service delivery.
Some of those laws are probably older than the internet itself.
And they just don't make sense. In today's digital world, we need to update the rulebook.
So we need to make sure our laws are keeping up with technology and supporting innovation.
Precisely. And on financial reporting, the report emphasizes the need for a more robust and comprehensive approach to tracking both costs and savings.
So we need to measure not just how much we're spending, but also what we're getting back in return.
Exactly. Things like time saved, efficiency gains, and improved user satisfaction.
It's about looking at the bigger picture, the overall value that these digital services are providing.
And they also recommend transparency in this financial reporting, making the information public so citizens can see how their tax dollars are being spent.
That's important. It gives people a chance to hold the government accountable.
And it builds trust.
Okay, so we have transparency, accountability, and legal modernization, all important pieces of the puzzle.
They are. And as we move forward, it's crucial to remember that this is not just about technology, it's about people.
Right, it's about how these changes impact people's lives.
And how we can use technology to create a better future for everyone.
Speaking of the future, I want to come back to those potential challenges we talked about earlier, the complexity of our government and the concerns around privacy and data security.
Yes, those are important issues to address.
Are there any other obstacles we need to be aware of as we navigate this digital transformation?
One big challenge is digital literacy and access. Not everyone in Canada has the same level of access to technology or the skills needed to use it effectively.
Right. We don't want to create a situation where some people are left behind.
Exactly. We need to make sure that everyone can benefit from these digital advancements.
So it's about creating a more inclusive digital society?
And we also need to be prepared for resistance to change. Government bureaucracies can be slow to adapt, and there will always be people who are comfortable with the way things are.
It's like turning a giant ship. It takes time and effort to change direction.
And another potential challenge is securing funding for these initiatives. Digital transformation is an ongoing process, and it requires continuous investment.
We need to make sure the money is there to support these changes in the long term.
Absolutely. It's an investment in our future.
So we have a lot to consider, but the potential benefits are huge.
They are. If we get this right, we can create a government that is more efficient, accessible, and responsive to the needs of Canadians.
A government that truly works for everyone in the digital age.
That's the goal.
But before we get too carried away, I want to get your thoughts on some of the potential risks or downsides of this digital transformation.
That's a good point. It's important to acknowledge that there are risks as well as benefits.
What are some of the things we need to be cautious about?
Well, one concern is the potential for increased surveillance and erosion of privacy. As more of our lives move online, there's a risk that governments could use this data to track our activities and monitor our behavior.
It's a little bit Big Brother-ish.
It is, and that's why it's so important to have strong privacy laws and oversight mechanisms in place.
We need to make sure that our rights are protected in the digital world.
Another potential risk is the concentration of power in the hands of tech companies. As governments rely more on private sector technology, there's a risk that these companies could gain too much influence.
Right. We need to be careful not to let the private sector dictate public policy.
Exactly. We need to strike a balance between leveraging the innovation of the private sector and protecting the public interest.
So privacy and the power of tech companies, those are definitely things to watch out for.
Absolutely. And another concern is cybersecurity. As governments digitize more services, they become more vulnerable to cyber attacks.
It's like building a fortress with no walls.
Exactly. We need to make sure that our digital systems are secure and resilient.
So investing in cybersecurity is essential.
And we also need to be mindful of the potential for algorithmic bias. As we use algorithms to automate decision-making processes, we need to make sure that those algorithms are fair and unbiased.
Right. We don't want to perpetuate existing inequalities through technology.
And finally, we need to make sure that everyone has access to these digital services. We don't want to create a digital divide where some people are left behind.
Digital inclusion is essential.
It is. We need to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to participate in this digital future.
Okay, so we have a lot to consider, both the potential benefits and the potential risks.
We do, but I believe that by having open and honest conversations about these issues, we can create a digital future that works for everyone.
I agree. It's important to engage in these conversations and make sure that our voices are heard.
And it's important to remember that this is not just a technological transformation. It's a societal one.
Right. This is about how we want to live and interact with each other in the digital age.
And it's up to all of us to shape that future.
We've talked about a lot in this deep dive.
We have, from Canada's plans to what's going on in Ukraine.
Even the things we need to be careful about as we move into this digital world.
It's a big topic with a lot of different angles.
But it's really all about people in the end, isn't it?
It is. It's about how we interact with government, how we get those services we need.
And making sure these changes are good for everyone.
Exactly. Not just a few.
So as we wrap things up, I want to leave everyone with something to think about.
Okay, what's that?
As Canada keeps moving on this digital path, what kind of future do you see?
Yeah, what role do you see yourself playing in all of this?
It's a question for all of us because this isn't just about the government or tech company.
It's about all Canadians.
The decisions we make now will shape what kind of digital society we have in the future.
That's a powerful thought.
So think about it as you use those government websites, those digital services.
Or even just as you're thinking about how much technology is part of your life.
What are your hopes?
And your worries.
What kind of world do you want to create?
It's your deep dive.
It's your government, your data, your future.
By talking about these things, asking those tough questions, and demanding transparency.
We can help create a digital world that reflects our values.
And our dreams for the future.
A future we can all be proud of.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope it's given you some new ideas.
Maybe challenge some of your assumptions.
And we hope it's inspired you to get involved in shaping Canada's digital future.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged.
And keep diving deep